Hey guys, Brian Beeler coming to you from the Storage Review Lab, again alongside Kevin O'Brien. We've got another product in today that we want to take you through, and it's this fella here from Synology. And back in June, Synology made quite the splash when they launched their own branded line of SSDs. They have a NVMe drive for caching and a SATA drive for capacity. In addition to those SSDs, they launched a couple cards. The one in my hand is a PCIe Edge card that holds 2 NVMe drives, but it also has another trick up its sleeve. Kevin, what's its big trick?
So this guy adds a 10 gig port, and you might be thinking, well, Synology's offered these expansion cards in the past. The difference, though, is their previous models were SATA M.2 only. So we actually made that mistake early on, thinking like, hey, we can use it, and then realized it was SATA device compatibility only, so we had to switch and upgrade to the newest one.
So in addition to this card, Synology also has one that's only 2 NVMe drives with no 10 gigs. They've got two choices. This guy is a little tricky to find in retail, but B&H and Newegg, those guys have it at $250. The one with just the 2 NVMe drives goes for $170. Package is a touch Spartan in the design, but that's okay. This is meant for work, not for looking beautiful. And Kevin, I'll hand you the, oh, there you go. You got the heat spreader.
Fancy.
You got some molding clay,
And it supports the 2280s and 22 or
10s,
yeah,
right?
2210s, which
So the long form and the more standard form.
yeah.
You've got a bracket in here. You've got a magnet or something.
I think it's another thermal pad.
You don't think it's a magnet?
Possibly. Well, it says it's. All these things are labeled, so
It's not like Kevin to consult the manual, so this is very surprising.
it says rubber ×4.
Really? What would that be?
Let's see what the manual says.
Quad rubber? All right.
Looks like it's just for the back of the little brace against the M.2.
All right, and so here's our card. It's got the 2 slots. It matches up with the top that screws in. It's pretty handily built. It's a nice card.
Yeah.
And then it comes with the larger bracket. The card works. We're going to drop it in this 1819 Plus that we have operational now. In terms of support, in the 19 series, it'll work with this one and the 2419 Plus. They do go back and hit a couple models from the 18. There's a rack station, the RS2818 RP Plus, the DS1618 Plus, and the DS3018XS. And then moving forward into the 20 series, the RS820 Plus, the RS820 RP Plus, which is just the redundant power version, and then the SA3600, SA3400 on the drive. So this card is going to go in the 1819. And then Kevin, let's take a look at the DSM view of our current 1819 Plus, just to show kind of the before part of the before and after.
Okay, so in here we have, we quickly hop into the control panel and we see the network interfaces. So we have 4 interfaces. These are all 1 gig, and you see the network status as 1,000 megabits per second. We have LAN 1 connected, and there's not really much else on that. And then for storage, we currently have a RAID 1 of 2 8 terabyte drives, so we get around 7.27 terabytes usable. But soon we'll be seeing a little bit more added in here.
All right, so Kevin dropped in the NVMe SSDs in the card, put the heat compound on the top.
Yeah, they gave little thermal pads and heat sink, and it's a pretty well-built M.2 adapter.
It's set up on the 110 though, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I would have guessed that more people with 80 millimeter drives would be buying
including
this, but
Synology's drives.
yeah.
Although they do have the long ones. Maybe they, I don't know.
Well, so the only difference though is the 110 millimeter standoffs were soldered onto the board, so maybe they figured put them on there. It's not like it hurts having them there.
Yeah, all right. So let's take a look now. We've got our NIC in the back of the unit.
And there is a blinky light. We did not know that until it was plugged in.
That's right. It's got a green light go. So let's see if we really did go and take a look at DSM and hope for the best.
And so here we're going to confirm that we have a new network interface, and we do. So
Number
LAN
5.
5.
Lucky LAN 5.
Yeah. And it's negotiating at 10,000 megabits per second, or 10 gig.
Is that what that means?
Yeah.
Oh, I just learned something new.
Yeah. So it doesn't have an IP address yet, but we can assign one. But we got it at the 10 gig speed.
Yep.
And now if we go over to our storage manager.
Make sure the drives are there, which would be handy.
Yeah. We get to see our 2 cache devices, which is the first time this platform has seen them because it does not have onboard.
Ooh, it's got
M.2s.
that new cache smell. That's nice.
Yes.
I would love that in a new NAS.
Yeah, so in here, your main step would be creating a volume, because without a volume you can't do a cache device. ext4 for higher performance. And this guy will save it in a couple of seconds, and after it's done created, which you might be able to hear the crunching sound of those 2 hard drives.
Yes, the crunch, crunch, crunch of a hard drive. I kind of like it though in a Synology. It makes me feel like it's working harder than.
And this is just 2. Imagine if it was 8.
Well, 8, yeah. Well, I've got 4, but that's why I keep it in the basement. And the NASs aren't loud, but when 4 drives are crunching away like that, it is noticeable if you had it in your living room, for instance.
Well, a few years ago when I was house hunting, I actually did have. See, I used one of the older 1813s, and for a little while, I had a NAS sitting in my living room at a smaller apartment, and I switched over to one of the. I think it was the DS 416 Slim. That
the
was
2.5-inch drives.
Yeah, a lot quieter, and then I used SSDs in there because we have a lot of SSDs.
Yes.
So now. You can see that we had an old, when these guys were reviewed prior, that
Right,
original LUN was missing.
So we did a video live stream actually that looked at all the Synology SSDs. So if you are so inclined, that's worth checking out.
So here we get the option of either read-only or read-write. Read-only would be really if you have just one of these SSDs.
Right, so in a pair, then you get the resiliency.
Yeah. Although you could have an additional cache amount if you want to do like RAID 0 striping for your cache, and instead of like 370, you'd have double that.
All right, so now it's setting up the SSDs as the cache for the volumes you set up prior.
In a little bit, we'll have SSD cache, and then we can configure if we want to do skip sequential or not, and then we can start applying some workloads to see this in action.
We'll talk about that. What's the decision factor there on the sequential configuration?
So if it's a fairly large array, so if you had 6 or 8 hard drives, even more if it's like RAID 10, you're probably going to see a large sequential like write absorption factor from those drives. Where if you have maybe a smaller disk group or maybe RAID 5, RAID 6 that might not have that large sequential number, maybe you want those sequential that sequential data being ingested by cache, or you are onboarding a ton of data that you want to be living inside cache, and you keep the sequential write enabled.
All right, so it's shown up there as an option now.
Yeah, so we generally, for testing purposes, uncheck that so we can get data warmed up faster. And in here, you get to see the activity. So right now there is about 1 gig of used capacity, and after that, there's not really much else.
Right. Okay, so we're going to put a little load against this. What's your plan there, just to put something up real quick, just to make sure, shake the system out, make sure everything's working?
Yeah, probably use one of our load generators and an iSCSI mount, and from there have our workload applied.
All right, well, let's get that done.
Yep.
All right, so you're all set up and ready to go, and while we're not going to run our entire test suite because that would take far too long for this video, you do have a scenario set up where we can quickly get the feel for how this works and make sure everything shakes out properly. So what do you have going on here from a test plan?
And so I created a 25 gig iSCSI LUN, and then I attached it through one of our VMware hosts. We have a virtual load gen. I passed that through to one of the VMs, and I mounted it on this Windows Server guy, and we're going to run Crystal Spark.
Now, CDM is not something we would typically run. It's not nearly as heavyweight as our full test plan, but this will pretty quickly and easily just make sure that everything's working as expected.
Yeah, so we're going to confirm that our sequential pass-through is still turned. Okay, we got to turn that guy off so it actually starts ingesting the data quickly, and we can kick it off. And initially, we're going to see the performance of the 2 hard drives, which in RAID 1 will be good for maybe 180, 200 megs a second. And then we should start seeing a lot of that data start get pushed up into cache. And right now, you can see that the used capacity is like 5 gig right now. I believe Crystal Spark is going to aim for 16 gigabytes. So eventually, you'll see the outlay there.
And you confirmed in that lower right corner of DSM that we are hitting our 10 gig.
Yeah, LAN 5 is the 10 gig port.
Okay, so everything looks good. It does take Crystal Disk Mark a little while to warm up and get its thing going.
Yeah, because it outlays the file first and then starts interacting with it.
So let's keep an eye on this, because now we're seeing the cache growing, right?
It looks like the amount of cache has topped out at around 16 gig, and the interface we're seeing around 67 megabytes a second down. But let's switch back over. Oh wait, okay. So read, we're getting 671 through that, and actually a better view in the disk station manager is probably going to be resource monitor, since there we're going to be able to see the actual disk interface. And here we see the data hitting the hard drives as well as data hitting the cache devices.
Okay. So everything's working.
Yep.
Which is good. So CDM will go through all of its read workloads first and then writes?
Yes.
Okay.
And that moves through sequential as well as random workloads. So we're going to see the shift. And this reporting, it's close to real time, but it's not going to be instantaneous. So you'll see a lagging effect with that.
Right. Synology actually does a pretty good job of helping you visualize data and activity throughout the system: CPU, RAM, network storage.
Yeah, and you can turn on historical logging as well, and then get perform or resource alarms regarding if things go out of bounds. And by default, they don't have the logging usage history turned on, but you can turn that on and start collecting it to go up pretty far.
Oh, look at all those pretty graphs.
Yeah, so here we saw around, so around 670 megs a second read, and then in terms of the IOPS on the 4K side, we were getting like 43,000 IOPS read. And again, the Crystal Spark isn't going to be it's not the best representation of performance.
Sure is easy and fast, though.
Yes, it works well to prove the point that the cache device is starting to work.
And in terms of what you'll see when you go through some more sustained workloads in our full testing, what's your expectation for what you'll see and how the cache will come into play, or how long it'll take for it to come into play and interact with your workloads?
It should happen pretty quick. So in our workloads, we focus on sequential and four corners type of areas, and then mixed workloads, so AK 7030. And since those M.2 SSDs each are faster than a 10 gig interface, I'm expecting that we'll be able to saturate the one 10 gig port.
Okay, great. So let's flip back and see what CDM's done. All right, so it's done some of its write workloads.
Yeah, and then afterwards it'll be staging the multi-threaded 4K and then the single-thread 4K.
And then looking back at DSM at the cache view, I think people really dig that chart. Look at all that.
And obviously, workloads will vary. Not all workloads, depending on how you have them set up, will have near 100% hit rates. But I mean, if you keep on accessing the same files, that's what you're striving for. And if you size your cache large enough, you should be able to hit and contain all of your workload inside of that.
Right, and these are decent sized drives too for that purpose. NVMe, so they're nice and quick. And you've got the pair in here, so you've got the little bit of resiliency too, which is nice.
Yeah. And we see this guy showing around 13,000 IOPS, and that's in RAID 1 across that. And if we go back over there, at the OS level, we're seeing around 27,000 IOPS or so.
So in terms of shaking it out, you're happy with this, I take it?
Yeah, it works, and we'll obviously start running some bigger weight benchmarks.
Yep, and meanwhile, the card hums along, the unit's happy, installation was
painless.
Minutes.
Yeah.
A couple minutes. And we've brought new life to a system that, while it's not old, 1819 Plus is still that 8-bay tower, desktop tower form factor is one of the most popular.
It gives a lot of flexibility. I mean, you can add in cards, obviously, and before you could put a 10 gig card or really any. Yeah.
But now with both, so that's the really cool thing is we get the 10 gig port, we get the 2 NVMe drives. Like I said, it's about $250 retail. If you want the card with just the 2 drives, it's about $170 US dollars. So they're relatively affordable for what you're getting. But we'll put this thing through its paces and have a full review over at storagereview.com when we're done. Thanks for tuning in.